Welcome, everybody. My name is Sarah Warka. I'm the president and CEO of the Newell Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm so glad that you guys are all here tonight, this afternoon, I should say. Great group, very passionate people out there, so we're glad you guys took the time to come here. I wanted to start with saying how this came to be, and actually, Laura, yes, she is the reason that this is happening. Actually, you guys maybe don't even know this either. There was a strategic planning work session for Park and Rec, and we were both at that, and she talked about how it's so hard to know what to do when coming to writing grant. And so I proposed to the Newell Mary Foundation, would you guys consider hosting a grant writing workshop? And John asked, well, is that something that the chamber could apply for a grant from the foundation, and we could do it. And so wonderful collaboration, great partnership, and so that is how we are here. So with that, certainly want to give huge thanks to the Newell Mary Foundation for allowing this program to happen, and to all the donors, of course, that provide the funds for the Newell Mary Foundation. Thank you to Turner Hall for the great space and the great food. And really, Mary Ellen's covering the rest of this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary Ellen. Some of you may know Mary Ellen already. We're very fortunate to have her help. When we thought about planning this, John and I both thought for sure that Mary Ellen should be the first person to talk to, that we should talk to. Yeah, no, sorry. So yes, Mary Ellen has a wealth of experience with the banking industry for decades, and then years of helping with economic development and nonprofit work, as well as writing and reviewing grants. And so, wealth of expertise. We're so glad to have her here. Thank you, Mary Ellen.
Well, one of the things that came to mind as soon as Sarah brought up the thought of doing a grant writing workshop and asking if I would help her pull it together was, gee, how long have I been writing grants and for what causes? And when you look at my gray hair, this means 40 or 50 years worth. Probably one of the first grants that I did was for the city of New Ulm, actually, for the Economic Development Group, getting a new elevator in Broadway House. And I think they're about to do all kinds of renovations again, so that's how long ago that was. And then it might have been the Lind House back in the day. There were a few others like that. It continued. It was the start to a history of helping organizations write grants and procuring dollars for it. One of the things that also, there's two sides of this. One writes a grant, you need funds, but the other side is you review grants and award them. And so that enters into the composition of the panel that we have here today. We do want to make a disclaimer though. We are only giving in a very informal way processes that some of us have used that are effective in writing a grant. There's no assurances or guarantees that if you follow what's in the notebook in front of you, you will be successful in writing a grant. But that's just a disclaimer that we want to be on the front end. In thinking about today's workshop, I wanted to have something that would get a little bit of audience participation. Now, if I called on each and every one of you, we would use up half of the time that we have for the workshop, so I don't want to do that. Instead, bear with me, I've selected a few names here for a purpose, and I'm going to ask a few people here, if you wouldn't mind, standing up, state only your name, the organization you represent, and what is your mission? Just in a few words. You can paraphrase it. It doesn't have to be verbatim. So I'm wondering if Steve Kircher, am I saying that correct? Are you here?
It's Steph.
Oh, Steph.
I am not Steve, but I just told Laura I knew she was gonna pick me because I just took a bite. So my name is Steph Kircher. I'm with the ISD 88 Foundation, and our mission is to write grants to help enhance the education for New Ulm public schools.
Okay, thank you. Now that's a great example of what I'm hoping on here. So I'm going to call on somebody else. Deb Steinberg, I know you're very shy from the Garden Club. Would you stand up and tell us your mission?
I just took a big bite of the pretzel. Oh, they're so clear.
That's okay, Deb. We all have to eat.
I'm Deb Steinberg. I'm the president of the New Ulm Garden Club and very active with the New Ulm Pollinator Park. So that's why Joe and I are here to maybe find some ways of some good funding sources.
Okay. Brad Kirk, or Sarge, how about you? You don't have to stand if you don't wish.
I'm Brad Kirk. I'm the director of the Vermont Area Emergency Food Shelf, and our mission is to feed the poor in the hungry. And just here to learn that life, we need grants, and some I get, some I don't, but it's always nice. I've never had any formal training or anything on it, so it's nice to learn.
Thank you. David Holcomb?
My name is Dave Holcomb. I'm representing the Nickel American Legion of the Ashton. And our situation is like most nonprofits and service organizations. The membership, just through attrition, you end up losing people. And so funds are always tight, and I just want to learn. And I have applied for a couple of grants and got a couple of grants, but probably could do better and know more what's out there, so that's why I want to come.
Scott, I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Scott Amy, what is your mission and what do you represent?
My name is Scott Aim. I'm with Sleepy Eye Medical Center. The person who's done all of our grant writing for our nonprofit establishment is retiring, so somebody has to pick that up, so I'm here to learn what I can.
You're it.
Yeah.
Okay. How about Denise Olson? And I don't know her at all. State Street Theater.
Hi, I'm Denise. I'm representing State Street Theater. Our mission is to share the joy of live performances and the art of theater with the New Ulm surrounding areas and Ulm, while also preserving our historical building. So that takes a lot of money.
That's true. And Linda Kilmer. Linda.
No, I'm Linda Kilmer. I volunteer at the Wandagog House. And basically when I retired from work, I decided to sightsee in Ulm and started going around different places. And when I toured the house, I never left. But the Wandagog House has received a few grants, one for painting, which was desperately needed. And that's expensive to paint the big house, especially when it's 700 colors. But I encourage everyone to come there. The feeling at the God House is just warm and friendly. And we have lots of visitors, and we can always use more volunteers, of course. But we do have a core group that really keep it going.
Thank you. And I'll stop at that. But I'm hoping you notice one thing. Each person who stood up and spoke represents a different type of entity. Some need social needs, some need the arts, some need historic preservation, things of that sort. And when you think of those that did not speak and what else is represented here, that's a lot of oomph making our communities a better place. So kudos to all of you for the time you take to make that happen within your respective organizations and for the communities that you serve. Thank you for doing that. There was another reason for doing so. As those of you that shared your mission, you're going to hear Sandy reference not only your organizational mission, but the mission of organizations that we apply to for funding. They have a mission too. And so that's going to play into the observations that Sandy was sharing with you. And then I wanted to share just a little bit of the lay of the land, if you will, how we'll proceed with this. So Sandy is going to put forth her presentation, and while she's doing so, if you think of questions, there are pens and paper on the table. Would you please jot them down, raise your hand, and someone from the chamber staff will pick those up. We will save questions for at the end. It saves time in the event that your question pertains to something Sandy intends to address a little bit later. It will give us a chance to organize similar questions so that we are more efficient in responding to those, but the panel will respond to those at the end. And then in between, while Sandy is visiting, there will on occasion be some comments from some of the panel members. So in putting together who should be on this particular endeavor, help with them, I couldn't help but think that it would be important to have at least 2 organizations that do offer grants and represented here, and you will see their bios in the materials that you handed out, which by the way is set up so you can take notes if you wish. But our 2 individuals, one Anna Pollock with the, I said it wrong, Pollock. I did this before in a printed situation. Anna Pollock with the Prairie Lakes Regional Arts Council. And next to her is John Billickman with the New Ulm Area Foundation. And they have, as you can see from their bios, just excellent background that lends itself to their representing the grantor side of what they think when they're reviewing grants or their boards are reviewing grants. So we wanted that side there. And then when I tried to think of who would be the best person that I could think of to be a presenter for today, my thought went immediately to Sandy Rankin. I had admired her gutsy approach to just and her persistence in pulling together Tea for Cancer organization. Further, I've had the ability to work with her on the board with State Street Theater. And she had come to me some time ago and asked about writing grants and so forth. She has now, she should have initials behind her name. She has now become quite proficient in knowing systems and sources and all of those things that go into making writing a grant, a good grant, important. So Sandy will be the person doing the presenting. I would ask you to make sure your cell phones are turned off while we proceed here. And again, the disclaimer, this is a common sense approach, very simple, no guarantees or assurances, but we look forward to hearing Sandy, and I'm sure all of you will find much of interest as we move forward. Sandy?
What's the word? Sorry. We're good. I just forget that.
They're a lot better than I am. I can't click and speak and use no cards at the same time, so we're gonna do this. All right. So, I haven't been doing this all my life, obviously, but I have learned some things, quite a few things along the way, because there are good mentors around that have done this and are willing to share that. And I think that when you think of grant writing, for maybe those of you who haven't done any grants, it feels like such a big beast, right? I mean, where do you start? How do you find out about them? I don't even understand the terms. So this is what I'm going to help you with. I always thought there should just be a place you can go to and you say, teach me how to write a grant. I've actually been to 2 or 3 different grant trainings, and I just wanted them to teach me how to write a grant. After doing this for a while, I realized that there's no way that anybody can stand up there and tell you how to write a grant. We can tell you who's granting, we can tell you why they're granting, how you can find them, what possesses a great grant application, but then the rest is up to you and your passion and what you have to bring to the organization that you are representing. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for taking the time. It's a beautiful day out there, but I think if this was the only good day we had coming up, maybe you wouldn't be here, but it sounds like our weekend's going to be pretty gorgeous, so we can all enjoy. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start. The first thing I thought with grants is, where do the grants come from? Now I got to remember I have to click and stuff. They all offered to do this for me, and I said, no, I can handle it. So the first way, we're going to start here. Okay, so there's lots of different granting entities out there. There are public and government grants. So those are going to be your state, local, federal government grants. They're often the larger grants, like the Minnesota Historical Society, Minnesota State Arts Board. They'll often require a lot more detailed requirements. It's going to take probably a lot longer to do a grant application for one of those larger government grants than it would for a family foundation grant. Their focus is primarily on public priorities like health, education, housing, and community development. A couple of those resources are grants.gov or Prairie Lakes Regional Arts Council, which is where Ann is from. So that's the public and the government. Then we get into foundations, and this is where most of the granting actually comes from. In fact, in 2025, U.S. foundations, so this is foundations just in the United States, if we add Canada in there, which we also can get from Canada, it's astronomical, but just the U.S. Foundations assets were projected to end at approximately $1.8 trillion of foundation money, which is marking a new record. And that increase reflects a significant growth in contributions, grants, and investment performance. So a foundation, what makes a foundation is they have to be a 501c3, an organization that is organized and operated exclusively for charitable purposes. This is the interesting part. So $1.8 trillion is what they have. They are required by law to give 5% of that, of their assets away each year. It's not a choice they make, it's something they have to do, but luckily they do it willingly. That's why they started their foundation. They want you to apply. It makes their jobs a lot easier if you're out there asking them for money. And the foundations have to publicly disclose their grant making annually with their 990s. So any of the resources that you find, you'll find that their 990s are all available for your research. Now, the different types of foundations are your corporate foundations. Most corporate foundations, they have a philanthropic program funded by businesses. So they often support communities where they have employees or they have businesses located there. Their common focus areas include community health, youth programs, and education. Great examples of corporate foundations are going to be your Targets, your Walmarts, your Best Buys, Quick Trip right here in town wants to hand out to the community. Family foundations, another type of foundation. Now those are the ones you can probably hear maybe a little bit more about. Those are created by individuals or families, and they are using money that their family has left them or requested to them, and they want to support charitable causes. They often have smaller boards and are more flexible based on their funding priorities. They may support causes that reflect the family's personal interests. If they lost somebody to cancer, maybe they're going to support cancer. If their father was a teacher, maybe it's all going to go to education. So it's all pretty passionate when you get to the family ones. Examples of those are the Schmidt and Erna Schmidt Foundation, which is in Rochester. That's a great one to check out. They grant every month and are very generous, but they do have their restrictions of what they support, so you'll want to check that out. Also, the McKnight Foundation is another family foundation. Typical grants for family foundations can range anywhere from $500 to $25,000 typically. You're not going to go to them for a new roof for the Lynn House, for instance, but they might support, you know, the front steps or something like that. So they'll still help it, but they're limited to what they can do. Community foundations is another type of foundation. Community foundations are public charities that manage charitable funds for a specific region. So, New Ulm, Brown County. They focus the supporting on nonprofits that benefit the local community, such as your arts and culture, your history, health, your education. Examples in Minnesota are the Minnesota Community Foundation, or John's affiliate is the New Ulm Area Foundation. And then you've got private foundations. There are independent foundations that are funded by endowments. They often have specific funding priorities and focus areas, and many will fund programs nationally or within certain geographic regions, but most will not entertain unsolicited requests. If they're private, it's usually for a good reason. They have a specific target for their money, and they usually keep it there. I'm going to ask the panel if they have anything that they want to add to that, or if we covered everything. All right, so that's where the money comes from, and there's lots of it. So how do we find these? I think that's a tough one, right? We know they're out there. How do you find them? So one of the options is online grant databases. 3 of them that I'm going to speak a little bit about. I'm not going to get too far into this, but there are 3 different levels, and one of them is called Grant Advance software. Another one is Grant Station software, and then another one is Candid, which is now purchased 2 companies called Foundation Directory and GuideStar. They just came together and they purchased those 2 merged, and there's a significance to that I'll tell you about in a little bit. What's great about these tools is it allows you to put your information in, and then you can search by the subject matter. For me, for T for Cancer, I'm going to search for cancer support. I'm not going to search for cancer research, because almost everything that comes up is going to be about cancer research. I can't take money for that because that's not what we're doing. But that's going to help me filter those out. Also, geographic location. If you are finding some great opportunities for financing or from funders, but they're mostly serving the Pennsylvania area, it doesn't pay to apply to them. You're spending a lot of time on an area that's probably not going to line up with their mission. Also, grant size. If you're looking for $25,000 and you see that the smallest grant that this perfect funder is giving is $150,000, they're probably not going to swim in that little pond to help somebody that's $25,000. They're going to look for ones that are higher. Now, could you find any for $125,000 or $150,000? Maybe, but you have to prove that pretty well. If you're that a company that or an organization that has a budget of maybe $20,000, all of a sudden needs $150,000. That's probably not going to fly. But the databases are powerful, but you still have to do the work. I remember, and Missy, I'm not going to pick on you, I'm just going to mention you. I remember we had coffee one day, and we were just about back out to our vehicles, and I said, oh, Missy, by the way, I said, Mary Ellen and I were just looking at this Grant Advance software, and it looks so good. What are your thoughts on searching databases? She goes, oh, they're great, but you still have work you're going to do. And I said, well, it looked really cool. You could pretty much get down to 200 companies and send an LOI to all these 200 companies. And she said, oh my gosh, Sandy, stop. She said, you can't do that. She said, you would not have enough resources to entertain 200 grant applications out there. You couldn't do it. She said, even if 50% or if 50 of them, 25%, acknowledged you, that would be 20 or 50 people that you would have to give extra reporting to, maybe have some interviews. You don't have the bandwidth to be able to do that. You need to narrow that down quite a bit further. So these search databases are great to be able to find that group, but as you go through them, you'll find out that you might only align really with 12 of them, and that's okay, because you'd rather have 12 really good options and spend your time on that than 80 of them that are just going to waste your time. All right, so the Grant Advance software is a little bit more expensive. That one is going to be about $4,000 or $5,000 for about a 3-year agreement. What's great about that one, it's got a strategic research to it, or searching, and it's got a lot of analytics to it. It helps you build your letters, your letter of intent, it helps you, or your letter of inquiry, your thank you letters. It has a place to file all of your things. It has a timeline for it, so you can do milestones, and you can tick it to say, if I haven't heard from them in 6 months, let me know, and I'll send them I'll touch them again. kind of thing. So that one's great. I'm finding with using it right now with State Street Theater that it takes a lot of time. I mean, it shows you a lot of stuff, but it's time intensive. Grant Station is kind of the middle tier. Grant Station is one that gives you a lot of those same tools that Grant Advance does, but you'll probably have to search or use your spreadsheet to file some of those things. You're not going to have a nice little, I think they call it a document support or something like that on Grant Advance. So it gives you the searching possibilities, it helps you write your letters, but it's not as robust and it doesn't have as much of a database storage as what the Grant Advance does. And one that I'm just starting to get familiar with now, and you're going to want to know this one, and maybe you already do, but it's the Foundation Directory, which is part of CANDID now, C-A-N-D-I-D. Foundation Directory has every registered 501c3 in its database. What you can do is you can start searching and say, they'll type in T for cancer. Well, the grants that we give are right here in town, and they're not real big, but that doesn't matter. If you guys are doing something with a cancer or a healthcare initiative, you might look at T for Cancer's profile and say, who have they received grants from? Because I have to report that on my 990. So if I've received grants and I've done my work right with my filings, you'll know who I got my grants from. That's a great opportunity for you to say, I'm going to try them. Now I have at least some funders' names, and I can go back to the database and say, tell me about these guys. And then, because you have to file everything into the Foundation Directory, you have who's on that board, who can I call, what address do I use, what do they require, do they have a website? So it's pretty great. So the way we kind of think about it is that Foundation Directory is like a massive library of foundations and their living history. Grant Station is more like a bulletin board of current grant opportunities. Grant Advance is a strategic research tool that helps you analyze and organize potential funders. So the best option, I think that the Foundation Directory is great, and it is available at the New Library. So otherwise, it's pretty expensive, but there's a couple ways. If you have a 501c3, you can work with a company called, or I think it's just, I don't know if it's a company or GuideStar. If it's an application of what it is, it's a certification that helps you as a 501c3 nonprofit identify your profile. And if you've given them all the information they need to be successfully promoting your 501c3, you find to get what they call a gold status or a gold transparency. And that's just going through the process of letting them know who are the directors, how much money is in their budget, who have you got grants from. If you can get that gold status from GuideStar, you can get Foundation Directory for free for a year. Also, the Grant Station is also, if you are a TechSoup subscriber, and TechSoup is a free for nonprofit application, and if you just apply to TechSoup for free, you'll get monthly emails, maybe even more than that, but it'll tell you, hey, if you're a nonprofit, you can get Microsoft Excel for this amount of money. Or we've got computers that are on sale right now for this amount of money. One thing they do is once or twice a year, they give you the opportunity to purchase Grant Station for $119 a year. So that's the one that I use. So there are some ways to do these things. I don't know that there's any way for Grant Advance to give you anything for free, but I do know that they have amazing, they all have great trainings on them. So like if you go to CANDID, in fact, if you go to learning.candid.org, you are going to find some of the most amazing trainings about how to fundraise, how do I submit a grant to a foundation that doesn't have a website. I can't even begin to tell you how many amazingly free trainings they have on that website. All right. So that's talking about our online. I promise the rest of them are going to take that long. Finding the rest of them, the community foundations. Now, again, the community is going to typically support local nonprofits. They like to support community health initiatives, education, social services, the arts and education. And they want to make an impact in the local community. So the community ones are the ones that really make a difference. They want to see their money at work. Corporate foundations of local businesses. So many corporations that have those philanthropic arms and they want to provide grants, of course, or sponsorships. And maybe it's giving you things in kind. You know, we all know about how wonderful, I'm just going to say, a liquor mart is at giving us wine for wine pools. Those are things that are important to them because they want people to know that they support the community. So we just have to be not afraid to ask. We just have to be courteous about what we're asking and how we're handling that. Corporate giving programs often focus on community health, family support, local community development, and the arts, the history, the culture, especially in a town like New Ulm, where, you know, we're all looking down the street to see what new festival is coming or what house is being restored, or, you know, there's a lot of pride in our community, and those businesses have as much to invest in that as we do, so they want to be involved. Then we've got the government grant portals. Grants.gov, the Minnesota Office of Grants Management. One thing to know about government grants, we already talked about, those are typically larger, much more detailed grants, and they're usually for larger amounts, and but they're going to require a lot more time. And I think John brought up the note to me the other day that you know, there's a lot more scrutiny involved in getting into a government grants. I don't know, John, if you want to speak to that a little bit.
So I think we're all aware that whenever we hear a news report nowadays, we hear about concerns about potential fraud going on with different nonprofit organizations and bad guys. So because of that, because you know, the grantors, which oftentimes are large governmental bodies or departments or things like that, I sincerely believe that they want to address that. One of the ways that we're looking to address that is really tightening up the scrutiny on who they're granting to and all the hoops that they have to jump through. So we're not saying you shouldn't investigate that. Just be aware that that's going on in the background.
Thank you. Yes, you know, we got to remember that that's our tax money at work, and so they are being a lot more careful with all of that. And then we have our professional networks and community connections. You know, there's nothing more important than what you guys are doing right now. Sitting down with other people, announcing who you are, where you're from. We learn more from each other than we do from walking around and trying to find a billboard that says, apply for a grant from such and such. Those don't happen. So partnerships with other nonprofit organizations. You know, we as Tea for Cancer have gotten some money from some of the Lions clubs that they have in town, and are from the communities around here. And they're making money to support other, you know, they're raising money to give money. And it's a great concept. So we love that, because then that money comes to us, and then we hand that money back out to somebody in the community. So by now, we've really touched 3 different entities that have touched that money, and eventually it's gone to someone within the community. So you'll want to check with the people right here in town, other nonprofits, Chamber of Commerce events. You can find so many other people that have the same type of passion or with nonprofit organizations through that. Community leadership groups, or relationships with hospitals, schools, and foundations. Tea for Cancer started because of a relationship I made with Missy one day we were at a different social event, and I pulled her aside and I said, I know you don't know me, but I have this idea, what do you think? And I'm pretty proud of where we started and where we came to. So those networking minutes that you take are extremely important. You're not ever going to regret that. Okay, so now we know where the money's coming from. We know kind of how to find it. Now there's some terms that you're going to probably hear. And the first one is a letter of inquiry. So not everybody has a nice little website that you can click on where it says, click here for application and we'll have your money to you in a week. That doesn't typically happen. But some of them will say that they will take unsolicited, especially if you're using one of these grant databases, you'll see how they expect you to communicate with them. And some of them will say they'll take unsolicited requests. That means anybody can apply. But then you'll get further and maybe you'll end up disqualifying them from your search because you're not in the right geographic location or the money's not right or whatever. But you have to do a letter of inquiry. You'll see that term a lot, the LOI. You're going to want it to be a letter that is going to be selling yourself, selling your company. So your typical, it's used for funders who want to know who you are, but they're not ready for a full proposal yet. And from a lot of the information I've heard just lately is some companies or some organizations will actually award money just based on a really good LOI. They feel like they know enough about you, so they bring it to their board and they approve it. So sometimes that can be the step that gets you there. A lot of times, though, they're going to read it. And one thing that I read is, it said, think of it as the first date. When you have that first conversation, they're going to decide if they want to talk to you again or not. So a typical LOI is going to include who you are, the problem that you're addressing, what you want to do, the amount you're requesting, and the expected impact, and if you have any other community partnerships. A lot of them like to see that you're not in this alone, that you're working with other community organizations, you're doing some collaborations. They also say, don't make it all about you. Do enough research. If you're going to do a letter of inquiry, know enough about them, and you can find that, like I said, in that foundation directory, or maybe it's something that Missy Dreckman told me about, and I can say in there, in a conversation with Missy Dreckman, I was told that, this might be a passion that you're willing to share with us, or something to that effect. They want to hear connection. And as far as like the amount requested, they don't want a budget. In fact, everything that I've heard is that they think that that's an insult. You send them a budget with a letter of inquiry, a lot of them say, don't do that. If we want that, we'll ask you for it. So it's a good idea to put in that we're looking at doing this program. We believe that $5,000 will cover that. We have a commitment of $2,500 from the Lions Club or the Lions Service, whatever that organization might be, and then of course complement them. And it should never be more than 1 to 2 pages. 2 pages would be the absolute maximum. So the best letter about you and the passion that you put in there is going to be what they will see. So that's LOI. Next one is rolling deadline. If you see something and it just says you have a rolling deadline, it means that the funders are going to accept applications anytime during the year rather than one specific deadline. However, know that the funds might run out. All right, if they've got $200,000 to fund, and you're at the last, you're one of their last ones that they're looking at, and you're asking for $15,000, you might be denied not because you didn't have a great application, but because they simply ran out of money. So the earlier applications usually have the stronger possibilities. Kind of look at it as a first come, first served basis. But just because you might miss that deadline or when they ran out of money, just keep that in your own tickler file because you'll want to resubmit again. Matching grant. Funders, a lot of times you'll find this mostly with our family funders, our foundations. They want to see that you're doing some of the work yourself and that they're just coming in to help. So, for instance, you might ask for 10,000, and they're gonna say, where are you gonna get the other 10,000? Or maybe you say, I need 10,000, and you're asking them for 5,000, and you're gonna tell them that you already raised the other 5,000, or that you have a plan for raising that 5,000. So that's become a pretty common thing now, and, but they're doing that because they're encouraging community support. It multiplies their impact. I'm gonna speak to this a little bit later, but for Tea for Cancer, we get $250 action team cards from private, as private members. And that's used for seed money for projects that we have going on. And we do a music single event about 4 times from fall to spring. And that $250 pays for the prizes that we raffle out. So that $250 usually brings us in about $1,500. But Thrive's getting the credit for that. So they love that, $250. We love it because we get $1,500 back. So it multiplies their impact when they partner with you. That's something that you want to consider, is that you want to ask for a matching grant. Capacity building grants, those are funds that are going to help strengthen the organization itself, not just a program. So sometimes we just need money to survive, right? We need money for, I think about Oak Hills. Oak Hills has a definite need right now. They're finding they need money for transportation to buy a new van. That's a project. That's going to be a program or a project type funding. But a capacity building is like strategic planning. It's actually I got that wrong. Your capacity building is going to strengthen you as an organization. So it could be your strategic planning opportunities, your technology upgrades, things that are going to make you better, hiring development staff, board training, fundraising software. They can help nonprofits become stronger and more sustainable. Your capital grants are going to be for physical structures. So those are going to be your physical assets, your infrastructure, your buildings, your renovations, equipment, major repairs, the new roof at the Lind House, land purchases, or they can be used to build an endowment. So that's what your capital grants are. Now your program grants, that's what we were talking about, like Oak Hills needs a new van. That would be something you can get a program grant, something where you're going to specifically say, this is what I'm doing. I've got a project or a program. I need this money for that. But you're going to have to make sure that that's how you use it. And you're going to have to prove that too. So that's a program grant. General operating grant, that's what a lot of us need, right? We just need to make sure we have enough money to keep the lights on. And so example of a general operating grant would be to help pay your salaries, to pay for your utilities, your insurance, your rent. Now remember that all of the things that we're talking about right now, all of those funders are usually going to tell you what they fund. They may say that they don't do general operating funding. They may just do capital, or they may just do project funding. So you're going to make sure that you know what type of funding you're asking for and what they are willing to do for you. So program funds fund what you do, but operating funds is how you survive. Geographic restrictions, we kind of already touched on that. They might only, if you find funders, they might only really support one specific state or city or county, or maybe they only do rural communities. There's a lot of them I found out there that really want to help with rural health and rural education. So that would be a restriction. I'm not going to apply for a grant from a company that supports cancer in New York City, because they're not even going to look at money. All right, and then we've got funder priorities. Now, this is the focus that the funder has. Remember, we talked about the 2 missions, how the 2 missions have to align. Everybody sitting here has a mission, or your organization has a mission that you're carrying out. But that funder also has a mission. And the example I gave you earlier is I'm looking to support cancer patients and their families. But if somebody is looking to give money for cancer research, I'm not a fit. They still are doing good things for cancer, but we're not asking for the same thing. So those two missions are close, but they don't align. So you want to watch and make sure that you are watching what the funders' priorities are. You don't want to waste their time, and you really don't want to waste yours either. And the last one we have for the term is the fiscal year and grant term. And it sounds pretty boring, but it's one of the most important things of all. Funders operate on their own fiscal year. Doesn't matter what yours is, they're operating on theirs. They're going to ask you for your financials based on their fiscal year. Or maybe they'll just say, we want your financials from 2024. Well, maybe your 2024 spanned from May in 2024 to April in 2025. You have to make sure that you're getting that right combination of data based on what they're asking for. And if you don't know, pick up the phone. Almost every place that you are applying has somebody to talk to. And all that does is help you with that relationship. You're building a relationship. And almost everybody that I have talked to regarding grants wants you to call. They want you to call and not waste anybody's time. So they don't consider the call a waste of time. So you want to do that. And the grant term is going to tell you how long that grant is going to run for. Sometimes they might run, we're going to pay a salary for this position for the next 3 years. Or maybe it's just going to be 1 year. You're going to want to know that because your reporting is going to tie into what that grant term was. So the fiscal year is the financial calendar the organization uses for budgeting and funding decisions. Many foundations award grants based on those cycles. The grant term refers to how long you have to use the funds once the grant is awarded. Some grants are meant for a single event, and some will span a year or two. Really, you want to make sure you're understanding what those deadlines are, because if you have to go back and redo all of your financials based on the wrong dates, it could put you into another cycle of their funding. So it really does matter what those dates are. All right. Do you guys have anything to add to that? Okay, this is a big one. Finding out, is the grant worth applying for? Well, do the two missions align? We already talked about that. Does the project fit the funder's priorities? Is funding amount realistic for the work being requested? You have to know that by the time you have to request money from them, you should have already put the pencil to the paper to decide if $5,000 is even enough. And if it isn't enough, but you know that they don't grant more than $5,000 typically, you can tell them, I have a $15,000 project. Here are the other ways I'm going to get money. I have already raised this much. I'm expecting this much from 2 pending grants, and I'd really like your help with this extra $5,000. And they want to be able to hear that. They're not opposed to being that third party in there. Do we have the capacity to deliver the project? Just remember that the work doesn't end when they say, here's your money. They typically want reporting. They want to know you're going to have to do end of cycle or end of grant reporting. And if you haven't done good bookkeeping throughout the process, you're going to have a hard time doing that final report at the end. But they want to know, did this accomplish what you had hoped for? Was the money sufficient? They want to know all of those things. So just remember, if you've got multiple projects going on and they happen to all end at the same time, do you have the bandwidth to entertain what might need to be happening after all of those are done? Because they don't end until the final reports are done. Sometimes the best decision with a grant is deciding not to do it. Maybe there's just not enough time, maybe it's not the right time, but it doesn't mean you can't try it another time. So it's okay to say it's not worth the money for. Sometimes you put in more time and effort than the money that they're willing to give. Anything on that? All right, so now we're going to move on. This is really, it all boils down to this. When you're gonna do a grant, the 3 questions that every proposal must answer, I don't care if it's your LOI or if it's a full proposal, you're gonna answer 3 questions. Who are you? Tell us about your organization and your mission. Assume that the person that's reading this doesn't know anything about you. How can you tell them everything you know in an amount of time and clarity that they can get the same passion for what you're doing as writing it? What problem are you solving? They want to know, is there really a community need out there? And what is that need? And then they're saying, how will our funding help? Tell us how you're going to utilize that. What changes is that going to make? Do you have any statistics on why you feel that this is so important? If you want to make sure that the things that you're asking for are somewhat measurable, right? You want to be able to go back and say, hey, I had at the theater, before we implemented this new development coordinator, we were sitting at 43% attendance when we could have been at 67, which we are now. So thank you for the money. We just increased our footprint right here in New Ulm. Those are the kinds of things that they want to know. So give them that information. Tell them who you are. The grant reviewers often have dozens, maybe hundreds of applications, and they're looking for organizations that clearly align with their mission and for their purpose for funding. They want to make sure that they are going to be a part of something great that's happening in your community, and they want to know that you have enough bandwidth to follow it up and to do it well and to represent them well. All right, so there's a grant proposal life cycle, and this truly is a circle. And to be honest, it starts with research, but I believe every grant cycle should start with stewardship. For our purposes today, we're going to start with research. You're going to want to research. Find out who those grantors are, where they're at. Do we align with them? That's the first thing. If you research them and something says this is not the right match, you're going to be done. That's going to stop. Prepare. Yep, I've got the right funder. Now I need to prepare. I need to read their guidelines. Read. You need to understand exactly what they need. You don't want to get down a rabbit hole of getting something and they're only asking for this much. Then you're going to write. And, do you have the right people involved in writing that grant? Do you need somebody to help with the financials? Things like that. Develop your narratives. We always suggest, and Mary Ellen, this came from Mary Ellen, we do our grants on a Word document, and we put everything on there, and then when we decide as a team, usually, that those are the right narratives, the right content, then we'll copy paste it into the application. But there's a lot of writing and a lot of work that gets done before you want to make sure that that's what you're going to say, right? You don't want to accidentally hit a send button and it's only half done. Not to say we've done that, we almost did. Then we want to submit it. If we have everything done, we believe it's right, then we want to submit it. And you want to complete it with all of the right attachments. And you want to make sure are your attachments even in the right format. Right now I'm going through the thing I talked about, that goal transparency for GuideStar, and I was going to send them my 501c3 EIF letter, and I realized that mine was in a TIF, and they wanted it in PDF, so I couldn't transfer that out, but I was this close to sending that the wrong way. And I'm not exactly sure what they would have thought of. They probably would have just sent me back saying, not the right format, GB. So, that's very, very important. Award or decline. Sometimes you might not hear anything for 6 months, and you need to decide what that ticker is for you to say, gosh, I haven't heard from them in 6 months. I'll go ahead and send them an email. Or I'll pick up the phone and call them and just say, is there anything else I can help you guys with? Do you need to know anything more about me? But maybe you won't hear anything. Maybe you'll just get ghosted on some of them. It does take a while to develop a relationship with these people. People are willing to give you more money or give you money more often if they feel like you have a relationship with them. So don't be afraid to make that call. I think persistence and annoyance are two different things. I think you can be persistent without being annoying. You don't want to be that person that when they see them coming up on your phone that they don't answer. But I think it's okay to check back with them. Let's say you are awarded the money, then you need to implement it. Well, also for stewardship, you probably want to send a thank you. You might want to call them and say, wow, thank you so much, we're so happy. But you want to carry the project out and submit the required reports. So you're going to keep all of your information, and then throughout this whole process, stewardship, that relationship building is the most important. If they gave it to you once and you built your relationship, it's a pretty good chance that they're going to see it the second time and they're going to say, hey, these guys are really cool to work with, and they might be at the top of your list the next time. If you don't get it, again, there's lots of different reasons why applications are rejected, but don't give up because you might be able to get it the next time. All right. So now we know the life cycle. We've kind of crossed over this as well. Getting started writing the grant. Again, read. Sometimes grant companies or grant funders will have a workshop or they'll review the applications with everybody that's applying. I know that Minnesota State Arts Board is very good about that. Prairie Lakes Regional Art Council, I know more by PRLMC. They give you the opportunities to learn about those applications before you even dive into it. And those are invaluable. Sometimes after you've submitted the applications, they'll let you know, hey, we're reviewing, the panels are reviewing the applications on such and such a day. This is where you sit in that lineup. You're welcome to listen. I tell you, I do that every time we have an opportunity. I've learned more about grant writing, listening to how they're critiquing other grants, than I've ever learned from any training I've ever taken. They will tell you when they're reading a grant what they thought was really interesting, or they'll say, I really like that they took the time to tell us about that little boy who needed this new tricycle or something, or something to that effect. Well, it gives you that leeway to say, you know what, I thought maybe some of those things were a little bit too menial or maybe too personal. And then you hear that those are the things they want. So don't be afraid to get on there and listen to those. You're going to learn, and you can carry that into your own. And you can't say anything. So when it's your time and they say, I wish they would have elaborated a little bit more on this. You just want to say, well, let me do that for you, but you can't. You can't. You can just sit and listen. But you know that for the next time. So you want to make sure, again, you're reading those guidelines and you're watching those deadlines, and then you make a nice little timeline or a milestone document to say, I think this is going to take us 4 weeks. And an online application for a community foundation might take you 3 hours, maybe an hour. But there are some that are going to take weeks, and we know that for a fact. And you should take the time, because anybody who tries to rush a large grant will be disappointed, I can almost guarantee it, because they're not easy. If you want to do them right, you got to take the time. And you need to reread them, and you need a second set of eyes. And I was talking to Mary Ellen about this the other day. I said, I think that you should always get that second set of eyes from somebody who knows nothing about your foundation. And she said, no, I don't agree with that. And her reason was better than mine. She said you should have somebody who's at least familiar with your organization, or they won't know what questions to ask, or they won't know what you're missing. And that makes total sense. Like if I didn't say something clear enough, somebody who knows your organization is going to realize that you weren't clear enough. Somebody who didn't know my organization wouldn't have a clue. So, very good. The one thing that you are remembering always is the basics. And just the basics are not, you want to make sure that they're always the same things. You're answering those 3 questions: who you are, What problem are you solving? And how will that money help? What's it going to do for the community? So you're gonna have your background and mission, the purpose of your request, your community need being addressed, the project description and expected outcomes, and the amount requested and how it will be used. But at the end of the day, you gotta answer those 3 basic questions. That's who are you, what problem are you solving, and how will the money help? All right, that gets us to narratives then. And the narratives are the big bulk side of those grants. The grantor's going to ask you questions and you need to come up with the best answer you can. And they'll tell you how long that answer can be. And it's amazing. Somebody like me who just rambles on and on and on and on, I'll write 2 pages for something that should be said in a paragraph. That's why I am the reason that they give you a character limit or a word limit in those narratives. And it's because I can't possibly say it the way that they want to without using 1,000 words I don't need. But you are going to want to make sure that those narratives have a clearly aligned mission in there. Every paragraph that you write, you gotta know that that grant reader and reviewer that doesn't know you is going to get enough out of that to make sure that you align. So you're gonna wanna do that. And you also have to make sure that even though, you have to know that even though you're submitting this grant proposal and it's 46 pages, you could be requested for additional information. So just be prepared for that. Anything else on that? Yes, Anna's got something. No, I'm here, Ellen.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the narrative too, and of course this is kitschy, but I have 5 C's that we talk about a lot, and clear and concise are going to be the top 2, right? Clear, concise, answer the questions as best you can. Also compassion, understanding that these are humans that are reviewing these grants. Gosh, knock on wood, I'm hopeful that humans will continue to always review grants and that it's not AI. But I think being compassionate about understanding that it is a human who's reading this and you are a human as well and you have a story and they want to hear that. Being confident and having confidence in yourself and your organization that you can do this grant and carry out your mission and carry out the logistics. And then the last one's a little bit cheeky, but it's care, but there's a word in front of it, which is who cares? Who cares? If it's just you, go back to the drawing board. If it's just your board, go back to the drawing board. If the community cares about this, if you have other partners that are caring about this and say, yeah, I care about this, I care if this happens or not, make sure that's said in your narrative. Who cares? To tell them who cares about this, whether it's the people who are affected by maybe your health services, they're affected by that illness or that disease. For me, obviously arts, I can probably look at everyone here and say, oh, your job probably touches art in some way. And so I think there's ways that you can translate what you do to match their mission and just answer that question, who cares?
My comments are little refresher reminders, if you will, go back to a couple of things that Sam's been talking about. I'm going to go all the way back to an experience when it comes to budgets. I actually had the experience in the early days when we bought we had the State Street Theater on our hands and we needed to look at separating utilities and all that good stuff. And I looked at grants and looked at board members and looked at purposes, other entities that got grants, and I found a grant source. So I called this entity, and she was really interested in the news that we had a project that had affordable housing connected with a theater that we were about to bring to life. And when all of a sudden she asked the question, what is the size of your budget? And I said $58,000. And there was a silence at the end of the line. And turns out that some entities will want this. They want to know that you've had a few years of operation and that you're on an upward trajectory and that you've got some sustainability in sight. So just be aware that sometimes that might happen as well, matching the type of grant to what it is you need. The other thing, and Sandy alluded to this, is having a second set of eyes reviewing the grant. Sometimes in working with people and writing grants and then viewing later what was written, I recognize that people in reading the instructions they were speed reading. They missed that there was an and in the sentence, and it's two parts, and we've only answered one part of it, and it's a key part that's missing. So really, really, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have maybe even a team approach where somebody does this, somebody gathers the data, somebody writes this narrative, somebody else writes this one, but that you proofread and sit there and watch. The guidelines that come, Sandy alluded to the workshops that Minnesota State Arts Board, for instance, and others do as well, have ahead of time to explain the grants. Their guidelines are 38 pages long. That's a big read, a long read, but it is so important to go through and highlight so you don't miss some point that they want to see in your application. So just wanted to add that.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, the other things too is don't be afraid if just telling the words isn't enough. They don't mind if you attach documents to support that. Like if you talk about, we took surveys from our audiences at the State Street Theater. Show them what the results of those surveys were. And, or if you went out and you gathered some information from 3 different resources and you're referencing that, show them that information. They're not going to tell you sent us too much stuff. If you have supporting documentation, go ahead and add it. Add it in their format that they ask for, but go ahead and add it. And then also make sure that within that part of that application, that you are letting them know that you are asking for this money and you do have the ability to follow it through and do what the intent is. If you show that you're maybe not such a strong board or such a strong organization, and they don't have any proof that you are a strong organization, they might not believe that you have the ability to do this project that you're asking for all this money for. So you want to make sure that you're showing them how strong you are and how your intent is to follow it up and make sure that it is going to be done with their money. All right. Then moving on, we've got the financial documentation. And now for a company or an organization like Tea for Cancer, I've been with it since day one. So I understand the financials perfectly, but I'm not a financial person. I can guarantee you that, and if my husband were here, he would be nodding so hard right now, he would have a headache for 2 weeks. But I can tell you, for Tea for Cancer, I can help with the financials. I can represent our financials just fine. When it comes to working with State Street Theater, I raise my hands and say I can't go down this side of this. There are parts of it that I'm very confident in writing. The financial side of it I am not. So we find the right people, Mary Ellen and Daryl, we have other people there that can handle that. So sometimes it's not okay or it's not easy for one person to write a grant. In some cases you want to bring in the experts. But what you're going to want is you're going to want a project budget. They've asked you not in an LOI, remember, but if you're doing a full proposal and they ask you for a project budget, John gave us an example the other day. He said sometimes they'll just send a request in saying, we think we need about $5,000. Well, if you think you need about $5,000, what is that going to cover? You need enough information to show them why $5,000 is the right dollar amount, but not so much information that they are like, I don't care about that. You already lost me. I don't need any of that information. I just need to know, how did you get to 5,000? Because maybe they'll look at that and they'll say, we don't have 5,000, but we might be able to handle the technology part of this for you of 3,000. So show them where that money is coming from or what your request is coming from. Give them enough that they can make an educated decision on that. Maybe they'll say, I think you're going to need a little more. Maybe they give you $7,500. You also want a statement of financial position, like a balance sheet, an organizational income statement. Almost everybody's going to ask for your documentation for your proof of 501c3 verification. So you're gonna wanna have that. That's gonna be just one of those documents you're gonna have handy all the time, in PDF format. They're gonna want your most recent 990. And then any additional financial documentation if requested. And you're gonna be wanting to do all your checks and balances on this financial side of things. So you're gonna you have to report back. Remember, they're gonna be asking you, how was this money spent? You're gonna have your receipts, you're gonna have your invoices. Mary Ellen, in those big projects we've had in the theater, do you hand the receipts in? Does all of that come into that report, in the final report?
Not the receipt. Not the receipt. Whoops.
I think you're on.
Am I on? Okay. Not the receipts themselves. They have most entities that are doing grants have their own budget format that they want to use, maybe totally different than what you're used to seeing. And so they're going to want to see the one that you submitted, and then they're going to want to see the actual results of it using their format. But in any event, the fact that you've been keeping track of it in your new traditional format, you're able to translate that data into what they need.
Very good. What happens if you have money left over?
Every entity that I've been fortunate enough to receive grants from, whether it was for theater or for some other entity here in New Ulm, has been kind enough to say, if you've got a little bit left over and you can use it to enhance whatever, they've allowed us to keep the funds. I have never, ever had an instance. Of course, if I had a huge amount, I'm talking rather minimal amounts. If we had huge amounts, I'm sure it won't be expected that we would return the unused portion to that vote. But I can't foresee that happening because it would mean you didn't plan well up front on what your needs were.
Anna, did you have anything else?
Sure, yeah, you want me to
So, just like to make an addendum, or similar to Mary Ellen's comment, if there is money left over after the grant, at least for New Ulm Area Foundation, we expect and appreciate being notified of that. Oftentimes, our board will say, thank you for letting us know that. Please go ahead and use that for other related projects. But we would really want to know about that in advance and be able to make a decision on that. Because there could be some circumstances where we could really use that excess leftover money for some other related project. Then they make a comment about balance sheets. So on balance sheets, if your organization has restricted funds, meaning that you have donors or grantors that gave you money and said it's for this specific purpose, it's good to let your grant or have your grant application explain that. Because otherwise, whoever is reading that is going to think, well, they just have this big pot of money, they don't need our grant. But in all actuality, you may not be able to touch that for the specific project for which you're applying for. So if you have unusual situations, it's great to give some explanation.
Yeah, good grantors will always include a narrative with your budget. Like, there's usually a slot to put a narrative with the budget, and if there's not, then I would reach out personally and say, okay, here's, I wanted to explain a few things. One thing on the extra funds, going back to kind of this scrutiny of public funding, right? I'll put my public funder hat on. So Prairie Lakes Regional Arts Council, we're a little bit unique in that we are a 501c3. We are not a state agency, but we are predominantly funded by state funds. And so most of the grants that we give out to the community are taxpayer dollars through a sales tax. And, you know, with that comes a bit more scrutiny around, what to do with leftover funds. We ourselves, as a 501c3, normally if someone comes to us and says, hey, we have extra funds, or we see a final report where it says extra funds, we'll call them up and say, are you able to use these the same way that you did with the dollars that you did use, right? Are you able to continue this effort? And if the answer is yes, we'll put that in the final report so that state overlords hear that. But let's say you're applying for a state grant, a USDA grant, a DEED grant, a state arts board grant, they're gonna need those dollars back. So don't tell them, right? And I say that, don't lie. but find ways to use those extra funds somehow. And if it deviates from your original plan, just tell them that. Just say, hey, plans changed a little. We got a sale on equipment. How great. We're being very responsible with our money. We got a sale on equipment. So we use some of that money to pay more artists, or we use some of that money to pay a contractor a few more hours than we originally thought. Use those state dollars and use those federal dollars, because if you tell them you even have 3 cents left, they're going to expect a 3-cent check to come in. So with state funds at least, and federal funds. With us, not so much. Again, we're not that .gov agency. But if you're applying for a .gov grant, they're going to be a little more scrutiny about it.
All right, thank you. Financially, you just want to remember, through all of this, you're really proving 2 things, and one of them is stewardship. Are you really doing what you said you were going to do with our money? Are you following and keeping on track with the project? Are you keeping good records? Are you prepared to give us that report that we want to? Do you have multiple funding sources? They want to know that you're doing your side of that for stewardship or for relationship building trust within that funder. And also, it's sustainability. We want to make sure that we are giving them enough information to know that you as a foundation are sustainable. You can, you have community partnerships. You've got collaborations that you do. You're not just on this on your own. You're planning for long term. You have program revenue. But the things that you're doing them to promote hopefully a long life. I was reading that most 501c3s don't make it 3 years. So they don't want to see that. These foundation directory people, they don't want to see that. They want to see everybody be successful. So they're helping us do that. We just have to give them enough evidence to show that we're worthy of that. One example we had of sustainability is, I talked about that Tea for Cancer does these music single events 3 or 4 times during the fall and the spring. And that shows, when I talk about that in any one of my grant proposals, because they see that we are doing something within the community to help the community, but to raise money from the community people. So everybody that comes there is contributing to the resources that come into us that then go out to the community. And we've had comments back on how they like to hear that's what they like, that's what they want to hear. So we're showing that we are doing our part in trying to stay sustainable. All right, now what makes a strong proposal? You have to consider yourself now on the side of a reviewer. And this is where I'm going to really talk to Anna and John again, because they're doing a lot of reviewing. That's their job. So I'm going to ask them, what do you consider a strong proposal? What makes it strong when you get it? What are you looking for?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, so I'll say for Prairie Lakes Regional Arts Council, and I would assume, and you can correct me this too, I would assume for most executive director positions, and that's where my position is, I'm not the one saying yes or no to an application. The only thing I'm saying yes or no to is our guidelines. So I'm going to be that first filter, and when I say I say my program director, Pam Trumbull. She's gonna look at that with an eagle eye saying, okay, this is in our region, right? We are constricted by geographical regions, so we serve the 9-county region. This in our region, the project is happening in our region, going back to that GuideStar charity check. So our online management, grants management system, Foundant, has GuideStar or Candid incorporated into the system. So we have to do a charity check, again, public funder, we have to do a charity check to make sure that those charities that are applying for our funds, or organizational funds, have a good status with the Secretary of State, with the Attorney General's office. They have their 501c3 letter that's not been compromised. All of that goes through our internal system. So if something doesn't pass those eligibility tests, that's where our office will, either pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, we're missing something. Again, I believe that it is good stewards of dollars to do that, to just not let it go into the trash and say, oh, we won't follow up with that, that's fine. No, we always contact them and say, hey, this is why you were ineligible, because if it's changeable or fixable, then hopefully you can apply next time, right? So our staff does that first. Then it goes to our board for review. And I'll say this, there's a two-way shield process that happens, right? As staff, we shield our board because people are gonna call our phone number first if they have a question about why they didn't get funded. But also it shields the staff to say, hey, we weren't the decision makers on this, but this is at least what we pick up from our board conversations. I'm in every single board meeting, right? So I know what the staff talks, or what the board talks about when they say things like, yeah, well, they've applied, their application has been copy and pasted for the last 10 years, and we just aren't really seeing anything new. Or, yeah, it doesn't feel like they're doing much outreach. When the question asked them, how are you reaching new audiences, their only response was Facebook. Right, that's not innovative. That's not saying, if we're asking the question, how are you reaching new audiences? Give us a really good answer on how you're reaching new audiences. So a lot of times those will be brought up in the board review process. Again, public funder, all of our reviews have to be public. So if you ever want to sit in on one of our board meetings, we have a Zoom link on our website. But like you said, it's a really good opportunity to hear what kind of conversations are happening. And I gotta say, it's some of the same conversations over and over again. Their budget wasn't very specific. I don't think that the timeline is realistic. The funds aren't going to be dispersed for another 15 days, but their project starts in a week. We can't refund reimbursements. That's another thing to look out for, is to see if the funder can fund the reimbursements, so funds that you already expended or expenses you've already had. Many times for public dollars, we can't fund reimbursements. We can only fund what's called incurred costs, which is costs that are incurred after you find out that you got the grant. So a lot of those things are talked about in these board meetings. And then again, I'll say it one last time, is are you doing something that the community cares about? Are you showing that, yes, we have gone out to the community and asked them, do you need this? And everyone has raised their hand saying yes. We have talked to people who have gone to the event last year, or maybe we did a survey or something, but it really making sure the headline is, we have a need that the community has asked for, and this is how we're going to meet it. If that is in your proposal, our board at least is probably talking about it in a really good light. And then just a disclaimer, last thing is, we've done this before, but sometimes you can have a phenomenal application, there just aren't funds available. I'll just, plug this bullet. We have our next board meeting is next Thursday. We've received $90,000 of applications, and we have about $40,000 to give out. And we're towards the end of our fiscal year right now, too, so that's a really good point to bring up. The timing of everything matters. But there are going to be some fantastic applications that get denied next week. Don't get discouraged. Keep applying. It might just be the timing. And again, going back to that grant term, see how long it can take to spend those dollars. If you have a summer event, there's probably a lot of other people thinking about grants around February, March for a summer event. But if you apply for funding in the fall, you can still use those funds in the summer, because for our grant term, that's a year. So you have a year to use those funds. So thinking ahead is a really good interest of, to think ahead. Sometimes it's too much ahead, where you reach out to a grantor and they'll say, oh, we haven't even opened up applications yet for next summer. But for organizations like me, like the State Arts Board, usually state, funded, publicly funded organizations, the further out you apply, the better off you are.
So I can just echo the things that Anna and Cindy have said here about what makes it a good, strong proposal. The Noel Meria Foundation, the best guidelines I can give you is look at our guidelines that are on our website. Make sure that your proposal is in alignment with our mission, our vision, and then with the guidelines. And we have 4 pillars or areas that would grant form. Sometimes people can really do the wordsmith, they can stretch their proposal to kind of fit with those. Other times, it doesn't take stretching at all. Their project is very crystal clear in terms of how it aligns. So that's going to be a stronger proposal, something that has to be a lot of wordsmithing to try to see how it might fit. And then making sure that the level of detail for financials, both the organization financial as well as the project budget, are detailed enough so that people who aren't familiar with your organization try to understand it, but then also not so detailed that they're gonna get bogged down and go with their eyes glazed over. By all means, we invite people, give us a call or send us an email when they start working on the grant proposal so that we can help them through it and answer their questions rather than feel frustrated and then just hit the submit button and cross their fingers. You know, it's our mission to grant funding, so we want to do that, but we have to do it to the best projects that we can find.
All right, so that's the perspective of the grant reviewer. You want to make sure, again, you can't say this enough, that the alignment with the funder's priorities are met. You know, one example I have of that is I found a grant funder, and they only wanted to give me money if I had a program that I wanted to support. They weren't going to give me money to give other people money for cancer support. But if I had a program, they would. So I thought, okay, well, maybe we could start a support group, your world support group. Well, those things are all wonderful, but that was not the need that I had. So I was trying to create a need to get money, and that really was not in the best interest of my time or their time, because I did not have the bandwidth to send people to a support group at that time to facilitate that so that I could spend their money in the way that they were intending it to be spent. So then you just look at it and you say, you know what, we don't align right now. It doesn't mean, you know, in the fall I want to do a day retreat for our, that might be the right opportunity to get that program money. But don't create a need just to take money. It needs to be there because you're going to end up falling on the short end of that, I can guarantee you. So the next item is use AI as a tool, not a replacement. We're going to talk a little bit more about AI. We already talked about the second set of eyes. And then there always is an opportunity for professional grant writers. I personally don't know how that would work. Mary Ellen has used them, and some are good, some are not as good. A lot of times they can give you the technical side of all the grant writing wonderfully, and then like as she said, she has to go through it and then just add the flavor. So sometimes that's the right option to take, but sometimes, you know, we have the best passion for it, right? So typically we're the ones that do it, but there is that opportunity to have professional grant writers. They are out there. I did want to talk a little bit about AI, because that's the buzzword now, right? I use ChatGPT probably 30 times a day. But I learned about AI from the chamber workshop that we had, and I did not understand it. I thought it was kind of stupid how they explained it until I actually put it to work, and I went, wow, that was the best way. He was the guy that had he said, he asked for a volunteer, and he said, tell me how to make a peanut butter sandwich. And I said, well, you take a piece of bread. And so he took the loaf of bread and he ripped open the container and the bread flew all over. And I thought, why, this is so stupid. Why is he doing this? And then I had to explain to him, now you need to pick up the bread, and he had to, well, he was saying, AI can only help you with things that they know exactly they know what you need. You have to tell them, they don't know from step to step. So in order to use AI for grant writing, it can be used as a tool, but it cannot be used as anything more than that. So it can be helpful in the writing process. It can be used for organizing your ideas, improving clarity, editing narratives. But it's not a replacement for the personal eyes, the personal thoughts, the knowledge and the experience that you have in the organization. So sometimes AI can take a basic idea and help refine it into something more clear, something more precise. But the organization must still provide the knowledge, the data, and the mission behind the project. You are the heart of your organization, and AI, I don't care how great that is, they're not going to know what that heart is. You have to tell it. AI should never create facts or program details. The organization must always provide the real information. Think of it as an editor or a brainstorming partner, not the author of your grant. One thing that I find helpful with it is when I'm using one of these grant resources, and I get one of those fields that says, give me keywords, or give me search options, or search words. I put in what I think, and I'll get 1,500 results back. And I'll put those, I'll tell ChatGPT, these are the ones I put in, and they'll say, oh no, those are too broad. This is what I would suggest, and then they'll help me narrow those search engines down. So here, because like I said, I have no lack of words, I will typically submit what I write and say, help me with this paragraph. So here's an example of one that I did the other day. I submitted to ChatGPT, I said, can you please help me with this paragraph? It needs to sound intelligent and be refined for clarity. I wrote, our organization works hard to help people in our community who are struggling with cancer and the financial obligations that come with that type of treatment. ChatGPT came back and said, our organization provides financial assistance to individuals and families in our community who are facing the economic challenges associated with cancer treatment. A lot less words, much more clear, but the exact same message. If it didn't say the same message, I couldn't use it, right? I don't want it to change what I was saying, I just want it to be more clear. So that was more clear. Honestly, it was much more intelligent sounding. Same message, less words, and it's still using words that people can understand. If people know me, they know I don't talk like that, so I don't want somebody to read something and go, oh, well, she had ChatGPT write that, so she doesn't use those types of words. I want to make sure that if I'm submitting something, it still sounds like something I might have said on a good day. All right. Oh, okay.
I have to, but one thing I'll say to that too is know your audience. I don't speak for the entire arts community, but I probably speak for a majority of it. In that, AI art is non-fundable. It's not fundable. But we understand that AI is an accessibility tool when it comes to grants. But just know that AI won't be at your event. So a final report, that's going to be hard to write a final report with AI. And for us personally, and I can only speak for Prairie Lakes Regional Arts Council, we've had many conversations with our board about this, right? And that there's transparency both ways. You should be asking grant organizations if they use AI to review grants. You should be asking that. Additionally, we will be implementing this next fiscal year a checkbox that just says, did you use AI to help write this grant? It has no weight towards the grant. It will not hurt or harm your grant application, but we want to know. We want to know how many people are using AI, because I think that better understands then for us the need that our community has. But again, I will really press that you should be asking your grant organizations if they use AI in the review process, because this is, I hope not a controversial statement, but AI has bias. And we want to make sure that we are, as an organization, are not providing the historical bias that AI has had. We're not recycling it out.
Thank you. Yes, it's definitely not a substitute, and it's scary to see what's coming around the corner, but I can't even imagine what AI would come up with to write a grant if they didn't have, like, it's one thing to have something edited based on the amount of characters and things like that, but you gotta tell it what you want it to say. So 6 reasons why grants get rejected. Like Anna has said, grants get rejected. I remember my first rejection that I got, I took it so personally. I couldn't talk about it for 2 days, and I cried for, honestly, a week. And then I said, grow up. You know, this is not the end of the world. It wasn't because you didn't do a good job, it's because they changed direction of how they wanted to, how they wanted their funds associated. And they were, but I still took it very personally, and I've had to do some growing ups and stuff. I'm not gonna say it still doesn't hurt. If you're passionate about something, you want everybody to be just as passionate as you are. But the reason that they would get rejected typically is there's no alignment with the funding priorities. So not anybody's fault, you just didn't align. An unclear narrative. You needed to give us more information. We didn't understand your need. The weak need statement. I bet I would have had a weak need statement if I would have applied for that program and I had to come up with just to get that money. That would be an example to me of something that probably would not have been a very strong need statement. You have an unrealistic budget for a project that doesn't align, or you have an incomplete application. You don't want that. Or, like Anna has said, and John has said, sometimes funds run out, and you just unfortunately weren't in the right place at the right time. But it doesn't mean you can't apply again. It just wasn't right now. Submitting the grant proposals, by this time now you've got it all, you want to review your worksheet, the checklist, you want to make sure that all the attachments were included in the right formats. Ensure that your character limits and your word limits have been met. Submit before the deadline. I remember Mary Ellen and I, within hours of meeting our deadline, and actually I had to call them a couple of times because we waited till the last minute, not on purpose. But when it ended up being at the last minute and we couldn't get it logged in. A little panicky, but typically everybody that you're working with, that was a technical issue and they came to our rescue. And save copies of the proposal, and if you get an online confirmation that you've gotten that, make sure you save that too. Now things that you should keep in mind, not every grant is going to be awarded. In fact, I believe that they have said that only 20% to 30% of the grants that you send out will get awarded. Grants often require post-award reporting. We've already talked about that. Keep all your records, make it easier on yourself. But a lot of them, we got a $1,500 grant from a community foundation. And that was the first time with all the community foundation that I was asked for a letter explaining the end of our project. So that was kind of fun to do that for a small community one. Again, that helps us build the relationships. And building relationships with the funders. It's not just about submitting your application. Many funders really want to build a relationship with an organization. And if they're supporting you, they want to know more about you. So make sure that you are sending them thank you cards. You are giving them a letter of inquiry if they are asking for one. You're calling them if you have questions. And don't be afraid of them. They're there working and wanting to help, just like you're trying to get help. Mary Ellen?
Also, lots of funders like to know that you're publicizing the fact that they're providing funding to you. So do include, whether it's a big check presentation, at least a news release or something on your website. Let folks know what entities were helping you and that they're available to help others as well as yourself.
Yeah, we already talked about tracking the deadlines and the grants, and sometimes a spreadsheet is all you need. When did I submit it? When did I hear back? When didn't I hear back? When did I touch them again? And you can put all of that stuff into a spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be a fancy online resource. And persistence improves success rates. Again, just because you might have missed something one time doesn't mean you can't apply again. Just about at the end here, the grant writing myth. So the myth that I've seen the most about in all of the trainings that I've been in and everything is that grant writing is about fancy writing. It's really not. The reality is it's about clear communication. So you're explaining a real community need. You're presenting a practical solution, showing responsible use of the funds. Those are the things that the grant needs to contain. It's not about fancy writing, it's just about being clear and real. Many people believe that it's all about the beautiful writing and complicated writing, but some of the strongest grants are written in very simple language. Clarity is far more important than fancy words in this situation. So if by chance you even are sending something through ChatGPT and they're using words, like I said, that you wouldn't typically use, you don't want that. You can ask ChatGPT not to do that, but just use your own words. They're going to be better anyway. All right, so bottom line is Grant writing success is preparation, alignment, and telling a clear story. Preparation matters. Take the time to learn about them. Who have they done business with before? Do you know anybody on their board? Sometimes you can see all their board members that might even have a little thing that says that they're a part of LinkedIn. Oh, maybe I can find them on. Maybe we have, similar friends. So you can take a look, and if you can find a connection, you've already started that relationship. They'd love to hear if there's a connection you have with somebody. And then always tell a clear and compelling story. Like I said, you guys all have a mission. You're all here for a reason. You all have a passion. Make sure that that's being told in the right. We've added an additional grant resources page for you guys. There's lots of different ones on a national level, and there's some on a local level. I did want to mention, I've talked a couple times about private financial and about how this is in no way a solicitation for private, I promise. But I'm not sure if people understand, so private is really passionate about being in the community. And these are, I wish I had this up on a slide, but I don't. Private area groups, so just this New Ulm area group has 2,586 private choice participants. So that means they have private members who are given money by private or corporate. It's not their money. Corporate is giving it to them. And they're giving them money every year and asking them to give it out to your favorite foundations, to your 501c3s. So with as many people, if there's almost 3,000 people in this community that have private choice dollars, there's a really good chance one of them's on your board, or is a volunteer for you, or has something having to do with your organization. Mention it to them. They're just changing something. I think we get the money now in April, and they give it for the whole year. And you can designate what 501c3s, and that's going to have to be a 501c3, are going to get that money. So it's there for them to use. So it's not their money. You're not taking money out of their pocket. They don't get it if they don't use it, but they need to designate it to 501c3s. There's over 4,000 private action teams. Those are those cards I was telling you about. Every qualified private member gets 2 action teams per calendar year. They can be used up to $250. That's meant to be seed money. We use that to buy our prizes for the Teen for Cancer raffles. And then that in turn turns into usually about $1,500. So again, if you know of people who have that affiliation with Private wants to be in the community, and they're doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. So take them up on it. In 2025, $19,217,000 went into this community from private choice dollars and action teams. So money's there. Use it. I think that is it. So I'm going to hand it back over to Mary Ellen.
My first question is, were there any questions? You see any hands go up, but perhaps there are. Well, those are good collectors. If you feel just for now, just saying, coming down and we need those that are similar. So we don't answer the same thing several times. Just ask you, I think Sandy did a great job of taking us, walking us through that entire process. And so how about another round? One of the things that the two of us are willing to do, and I know that our grantor's are available for this as well. In your materials, you've got the contact information for the Chamber of Commerce. If anyone has further questions, or you're in the middle of writing something and you feel like you just would like somebody to take a look at it, am I on the right track, what do you think? Sandy and I, given her wherever we are time-wise, are willing to be of assistance to, because we want our local community to continue to be as strong as it can be. And when it comes to certain questions as well, both our Prairie Lakes, Guelph Mary Foundation, and other funders as well are willing and available to answer questions. But if you shoot those to the Chamber of Commerce at the address that's been given you, they will forward it to whichever of us is appropriate to maybe help you with whatever it is your project consists of. With that, and we got some questions sorted. Okay. Do you want to take any of this?
I think you're best.
Okay. I'm going to answer the first one that I feel is the easiest to answer or quickest. Does it matter when you submit a grant request on the last day versus the first? When do they start receiving the grant requests? Again, I'll speak for Prairie Lakes Regional Arts Council. We usually start looking at applications about 2 weeks before a deadline. And again, it's, as was kind of stated up here, it's always a good idea to try and submit before a deadline. A, just because you don't have to do that down to the wire, oh my gosh, you don't have a password, or something like that. And it's usually if it's a smaller organization, I mean, even like us, if someone has reached out to us before the deadline and they're eligible, their project is complete, they just had some sort of, hiccup, we will extend that deadline. But I'll say this, .gov organizations normally won't. But I will say, if you start or submit it earlier, then we can look at it for eligibility. If it's not eligible, we can immediately tell you why. Or maybe there's one error, maybe there's a file upload that was the wrong file, something like that. It's always the best practice to submit an application earlier rather than later. Because you're probably going to be a part of a handful or more that are submitting on that last day. And odds are it's probably not going to have the same scrutiny that it did, at least from our eyes, from staff's eyes, for eligibility as it would, that day that it's submitted. I don't know what other organizations do. I think that, do you want to speak to that maybe? Okay.
For Noel Marriott Foundation, our process is pretty similar. Our grant application window is 1 month. Typically, we get a bunch in within the first few days. And then it's kind of silent until about the last week before the deadline. And then it really starts picking up. So my job is to look through all of the applications and all of the attachments and things and make sure that they're correct. And like Anna said, in her organization, when there's a whole bunch right at the very end, it's harder with the level of help that we do with the ones that come in early. So we encourage people to submit them early. But our grants committee, then our board, only sees all of the qualified applications all at the same time. So they don't know if something came in the first week or in the last week. However, if there were ones that came in after the deadline, they were good applications and fully qualified and all the right things, I will pass them on to the grants committee and notify the grants committee that they came in after the deadline. And then the grants committee will have a discussion over, do we have funding available or not? If not, that could be a criteria that it was late.
Another question we had was, do you have any tips if you are writing a grant for a startup program? And this was touched on a few times. Start small. Start small. Odds are, if you are an organization with one person who's a volunteer and you have a volunteer board, and your project is looking at around $1,000, if you apply for $10,000, sometimes it is more money, more problems. Especially when you start going off thresholds of 990s. So there are different forms of 990s that the IRS requires from nonprofits. Once you pass a $50,000 threshold, there's a lot more requirements that you have to submit. And then even further, if you pass $1 million or tens of millions of dollars, you're required by the state to do an audit, and that's not a fun process. I do one every year. So I would really recommend to apply within your means. And just note that when you have more money, it does mean more requirements, maybe not even just for that grant, but state requirements, federal IRS requirements as well. And then also if you're applying for a grant as a startup, it's really hard to show a track record, right? It's hard to show done this program for 10 years, we know that the community likes it, but that's where the community engagement comes into play. You've had conversations with people in the community, or you had conversations with other organizations that are similar. Maybe you've had, you've done some research on an organization that might not be in this region, but is in the state or in the country that does a very similar thing to you, but you want to bring it right here to New Ulm. You can use other people's success stories as your own because the ideas might be similar. Just showing and proving that this is what I'm going to do when we do this program. This is the staff that I want to hire when we do this program. They will do X, Y, and Z. When we start the program, this is how we're going to intake new clients. This is how we're going to intake new artists. All of that is a little bit hypothetical when you're first starting out, but to be as detailed as possible and to research what kind of programs or organization you're going to be, all of that can add up to a startup program. And then, once you have that 501c3 status, that is gold on a piece of paper. As we mentioned earlier, there's TechSoup. As a 501c3, you get Canva Pro, which is a pretty high horsepower organization now. I mean, it is up there with Photoshop, don't quote me on that, but Google Workspace, so an email, you can have a legitimate email, a credible email address, so you aren't just having to use @hotmail.com or @gmail.com. Google Workspace is free for nonprofits. There's an organization called Good Match, which gives you Zoom for a high discount. Slack is free. Slack is an interpersonal kind of messaging system. If you have team members like board members or volunteers that you want to get information out. There's tax exemptions, so don't pay that sales tax if you have that nonprofit status. Everywhere you can, make sure that you have a state, it's called an ST3, make sure you have that so you're saving 7% or more on some of those purchases, especially large purchases. And then the last one is QuickBooks. That I think is also on TechSoup as well, and a lot of organizations fail because of mismatched finances, right? They just can't manage the finances. Have an organization or a software like QuickBooks help you out, and you can get steep discounts as a nonprofit too. So as a startup, just make sure you are Googling as many things that you can get for free or at a highly discounted rate as possible. It will help you in the long run, even if you're a one-person staff who's not getting paid with a volunteer board. Run your organization like you are a full-blown organization, because setting it up right now will help so much in the future.
So with regards to startup programs, New Ulm Area Foundation doesn't automatically discount or reject those, but we do put more thought and scrutiny into applications that we receive for startup programs. The reason for that is we just want to make sure that it's going to be sustainable. Running a nonprofit operation, no matter how big or how small, is a lot of work. And connecting and thinking both about the mission, but as well as running a business all at the same time, often with a skeleton crew, if you have a crew. Sometimes it's just one person. So we understand that as a foundation, and we want to make sure that you're set up for success. So if you're in that situation, you're applying for a grant, make sure that your narrative talks about that specifically. What things you're going to do in order to be successful so that you can be commissioned at your effort. We have one more question. Since I got the mic, I'll jump in and cover this and then pass it over to Hannah. So this one says that the writer has encountered several grant questions where each question actually is comprised of 4 or 5 different ones that are lumped together, kind of go off in different directions. And how do they answer that without rambling? First off, on behalf of grantors, I want to apologize for the situation. As grantors, we should take responsibility for writing clear application forms and having them proofread and trying to put ourselves in the shoes of people who are filling out the application. So whoever that is, hopefully it's not New Ulm Area Foundation. If you ever think it is, let me know and we can make changes to our application, hopefully. Otherwise, my best advice is just do the best you can to try and answer all the questions that are going off in different directions.
Yeah, we probably are the reason why this question exists for a long time. I'll say this too, a lot of our reporting requirements to the State Arts Board are just redundant questions over and over. But I will say, to your point, give them feedback. Nonprofits, hopefully, foundations, hopefully, exist because they want to help. And so if they might not know always the best way to help your community or your situation. And so I think, at least for me as a funder, and we're state funded again, I'll say it 700 more times, but we have to do a needs assessment every 4 years to make sure that we really are using these public dollars in a way that the community asks for. And through that, if you get, no one wants to fill out a survey, but if it's a survey that's saying, hey, are our grants easy to apply for? You actually feel like we're asking questions that aren't 3 or 4 questions in one, but are actually asking, one thing at a time. Make sure you give that feedback. If it's in a final report and there's, do you have any additional comments? Do you have any additional questions or things you'd like to share? Feel free to share that information. I think that as funders, we can do better. We can. We are the ones that hold the power, and I, personally am very aware of that. Our board is aware of that, and so we hold the power. However, we want to help. That's the reason why we exist. We would not exist if there were no arts organizations in our region. So we better serve the arts organizations in our region.
That was the last question.
It was.
I'll just touch on a couple of things as we are already past the 6 o'clock timeline. And that is that do we have your house in order? If you're relatively new or you're finally getting into applying for grants, things of that sort, your governance structure, your organizational structure, your financial structure, all of that, you certainly have that all in place before you start applying for grants. The other thing that I would just say is that I'm so appreciative of the effort that Sandy put into this, that our other presenters, panelists put into this, and the fact that all of you, again, as I said in the beginning, are representing efforts within the community to improve the community. You're to be applauded for that. I do think we should also say thank you to Noel Meria Foundation for providing the funding that makes this particular event possible. So thank you, Jonathan. Is Sarah here yet? No, she's not. I was just going to ask if she had any final words to say. With that, thank you for your attendance. Let us know if we can help you in any way. And thanks for all you do.